Hello, hello. Welcome back, guys. So today we are going to be reading from Guns for General Washington. We're going to read chapters 13 and 14. Before we can read chapters 13 and 14, I do want to let you know it's been a long time since we read chapters 1 through 12. So what I have given you, and this is online on the website, I have given you the chapter summaries for chapters 1 through 12. So if you can just flip through these really quickly and read through the chapters, you can help yourself remember what the book was about so far. It'll make a lot more sense when we start jumping in. Help you remember character names, things like that. So please make sure you've looked through this. This was sent to your parents via email. It's on the website, and it's most likely in the team room. So lots of places to find it. We are going to be reading today. There are 3 different ways that you guys can do this, guys. One, you can just literally read straight through with me. I'll be reading, and you guys can just sit and listen to me read and listen to me talk. Then you can go back and you can do your markups. The markups are just like they used to be when they were assigned for homework. They're on my webpage and they're in separate folders. So you'll see them online. It'll be like the photo album. And I'm going to try to categorize them by chapters. I just don't know if I can. So you'll have to look at them and just kind of be aware of how they post. Remember, the most recent one will be the most recent one. So you have to look at the page numbers at the bottom or at the top to make sure you're looking at the right one. It's not any other way I can really do it for you. All right, so there's one way. So just read straight through, markup later. The other one is just look at the markups online and read online while I'm reading, so that you can actually see those markups in action. So you go, oh, look, this is going to be characterization. She's reading characterization right now because it's pink. Or, oh, look, that's underlined in orange, so that means Miss Wood's reading about conflict, or whatever the case may be. And the last way is you just read and mark up as you go. So there's different options, whatever works for you guys. There's no one set way. I do want you to know that I really need you marking up your books, because at the end of this, I'm going to have you start at 13. And I'm going to have you create a little video for me of you flipping like this through your book so that I can see your pages marked up. And that will be great. It's the best that we can do. If we go back, I'm actually going to ask for your books. If we don't go back, I'll have you upload a video to the team room for me. Okay? All right, so I miss you. I miss you, Sammy. Where are you? You haven't been in class lately. I miss you telling everyone to be quiet and hush up. And Jonathan, I miss you asking to go to the bathroom all the time. I miss you guys. This isn't quite the same for me. I like the interaction in class, but this will have to do until we meet again, okay? All right, so let's get started. Let's go. All right, chapter 13. Good news for the British. So when I look at this and I hear good news for the British, I'm going to think to myself, I bet this chapter is going to be told from the British perspective. Because remember that the chapters change. Sometimes we have sometimes we have Will Knox's perspective. Sometimes we have Paul Revere Jr.'s perspective. Sometimes we have General Washington. It just depends on who's telling the story at that point. So when I say good news for the British, I'm going to pretty much say it's going to be the British point of view. All right, while Henry Knox's cannon convoy was stalled at the Mohawk River, remember there wasn't enough ice for them to get across, so that's setting, and then cannon convoy's alliteration, so I have that done in purple with the little underlines. Miss Eckert is texting me right now. She texted me when I was reading the other book as well. It's kind of funny. All right, while Henry Knox's cannon convoy was stalled at the Mohawk River, General Major William Howe, back in Boston, was busy making plans. So there's a lot of setting in that paragraph. In his captain aboard the HMS Somerset, Sir William read a secret dispatch. That means a secret letter, like a spy letter, from London. He read it through and then he read it again. Locking it in his desk drawer, he leaned back and he smiled. So guys, we've got some foreshadowing here. He knows something that we don't know. After so many disappointments, it was nice to have good news. Muffled against the cold, the British commander stepped onto the deck and looked around the harbor. Like faithful watchdogs, this is going to be a simile, like faithful watchdogs, his ships were all in place, standing guard over the helpless city. Howe began to pace alongside the ornate or fancy railing, reviewing in his mind the events that had recently taken place. So now we're going to kind of go into what's called a flashback. We're going to kind of go backwards and we're going to relive the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago in mid-December, transports had sailed from England, bringing in a regiment of Marines. A regiment of Marines is going to be a group of men. So some boats sailed from England, bringing in extra troop members. The other ships had arrived from the Bay of Fundy in Canada, carrying hay and grain for the horses. We're going to get lots of orange here, guys. But the real supply convoy, the one that he had been counting on, had met with disaster. 26 ships had left Plymouth, England, bound for Boston Harbor. They carried thousands of redcoats, so thousands of soldiers, as well as cannons and powder for the cannons and the muskets, and food and muskets and everything the general was waiting for. Then, in mid-ocean, the convoy sailed into a hurricane. The ships were scattered and blown off course and wound up so far to the south in the British West Indies. During the storm, many soldiers were lost and the ships were damaged. So that's all right there is obviously going to be man versus nature. Some had escaped without too much harm, but it would take a long time for these ships to be refitted and then to beat their way north. That's an idiom, so mark that purple. In the middle of winter. According to adding to Howe's problems, he had to deal with the cursed little ships called privateers. These ships were not any part of an official navy, but they were rebels that Congress allowed them to capture any British vessels that came their ways. So guys, a privateer is like a private boat that is being manned by patriots, and they're going out and they're trying to take over British boats. And they're successful. They really, really are. In fact, it's one of the reasons for the ultimate success later on, but got a lot of time before we get there. To the colonists, the raiders were heroes, but to General Howe, the armed privateers were plain pirates. Okay, so guys, this is a compare-contrast statement. So to the Patriots, they were one, but to the British, they were another. This is also a good example of a compound sentence. Remember our fanboys, for and nor, but, or, yet, so? So if you look at this sentence, you're going to have the word but, and the comma precedes or comes before that word but. So if you look at the left and then you look at the right, you'll see that you have a subject to verb and a complete thought in front of the fanboy. And then you have that subject verb and complete thought on the other side of the fanboy. So just kind of a cool situation. These were lawless ships that stole out of ports and attacked his merchantmen. Then they took cover in the many bays and inlets of New England. These privateers not only captured Howe's cargo, but then they were able to escape to shallow waters where his warships could not follow. I wrote, smart. So guys, growing up, I had a coffee table in my living room, and I had a little puppy, and I had this little puppy would climb inside of that little barricade, and the other dogs couldn't get in because it had like a little, the puppy was small enough to get under or over maybe, I don't remember which one it was, but the other bigger dogs couldn't get to the puppy. So when the puppy was tired of the dogs, the puppy would go in and hide, and this kind of reminds me of the privateer boats. All in all, 1775 had been a black year for Sir William. A year filled with trouble. So a black year, that's going to denote negativity and darkness and dismalness, because black has that kind of color connotation. So definitely an idiom there. We want to mark that in purple. But the next we're going to continue marking in purple, except it's foreshadowing. But the secret dispatch that had arrived had gave him hope. According to this message, a new supply fleet was being assembled, even larger than the last. After the start of the new year, this convoy would cross the Atlantic with the reinforcements he needed. In a neat, flowery hand, the Secretary of Admiralty had promised Howe 40,000 troops, plus enough weapons to carry out all of his plans for all of 1776 up until May of 1777. That's not good news, guys. Not good news at all. Definitely right there, we've got some yellow here for setting, and then we've got our orange here. Guys, also remember, you can always pause the video right now and mark up things, and then you don't have to go to the website, because I am going to show you the pages. The general returned to his cabin to study his maps. He would rely on the Admiralty. If the weather behaved, the transports and supply ships would arrive soon. So guys, this here shows, if you look right here, you're going to see that we've got characterization of General Howe as he relies on the Admiralty. And then we've got an idiom here as it says, if the weather behaved. So we've got man versus nature. It's got a little orange there, but we've also got an idiom playing in it. Factoring in. Then, with a powerful new force, he would strike. He was tired of the stalemate, tired of the inactivity, tired of the fool rebels with their prattle about freedom and liberty. Did you catch that, guys? We go tired, tired, tired. Remember that that's an elaboration technique called repetition, and that lets us know what's really going on in our character. He's tired, guys. But it's not just like tired, like, oh, I stayed up late last night playing, whatever video game I'm playing or binge watching something. It means he's tired in his soul. So there's a little bit more of a significance there. Sir William Howe could hardly wait to crush Washington and the colonial army once and for all. So remember that for us right now, we're marking suspense in green. So we definitely have a suspenseful ending for our chapter there. Okay, so before we go on, this is definitely told from Howe's perspective. And what we can tell from this chapter is he's getting a lot of reinforcements of things that are coming in. Now, this is not good news for the Patriots, because remember, we're hungry, we're starving, we're cold, we don't have supplies. Meanwhile, we have the Knox brothers trying to get all these cannons for us from Fort Ticonderoga. Okay, and by the way, I just wanted to show you this. The other day, I was doing a little puzzle, and my pencil says Ticonderoga on it. And I was like, oh, I miss my kids. Anyway, just thinking about you guys. All right, chapter 14, dangerous ice. They don't mean ice like in a cup, guys. So remember that the Knox brothers are trying to get these cannons. Some of these cannons in their wagons weigh as much as like a GMC, like a big pickup truck or a Suburban. I mean, like elephants, guys. These weigh a ton, literally a ton. So keep in mind that this is pretty dangerous. Chapter 14, dangerous ice. Which, by the way, lets me know we're going back to Henry and Will's perspective, because that's who's dealing with ice. Henry and his men spent the first day of 1776 trying to strengthen the ice of the Mohawk River. So obviously, guys, we've got setting. We've got let me kind of show you the full page. We're going to have setting here in yellow, and then we're going to start moving into suspense later on. So let's read this page. Henry and his men spent the first day of 1776 trying to strengthen the ice of the Mohawk River. To begin with, they laid out the shortest route across the river. Then at certain spots, the men chopped holes through the ice. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're going to tell me that if you want to make ice stronger on the surface of a river, I got to chop a hole in it? Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Unless you understand what happens next. Guys, they're going to do this. Make a visual for you. I want you to imagine that this is the ice. They've punched a hole in it, and what's going to happen is I want you to imagine that this is the water, this is the surface of the river. This is the water. When they punch that hole, the water is going to come up, through, and then spill out on top. Well, if they keep doing that over time, the water layer is going to get thicker and thicker and thicker. I have lots of Post-it notes on my desk. And thicker. Oh, we're gonna switch up the color. And thicker. So do you see how the ice would actually thicken up by punching the holes and allowing the water to come through? Okay, so this is what they're doing, but it's gonna take a lot of time, and that's okay. They have a little bit of time. The water gushed up through these holes, flowing across the surface. In the cold, wintry air, the water froze quickly, adding a new layer of ice to what was already there. So they're gonna repeat this, guys, over and over and over and over and over until they have it thick enough. The crew did this several times until the ice had built up and thickened. Now it was stronger, but would it be strong enough? Will stepped out onto the river. He walked up and down, frowning. It might hold the big loads, he said to his brother, but I'm not powerful, sure. So do you see how this would be suspense? It's like adding that music, dun, 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 dun. I'm like, is it gonna hold? Is it gonna go? Is it gonna go? What's gonna happen? Are they gonna go in? Are the cannons gonna go through? Henry shrugged. We won't know until we try. But we'll move the guns one at a time, starting with the lightest. Tell the driver that no team is to go until the one before is safe on the other side. The colonel had a long rope tied to the front of each sled and wagon. The other end was attached to the harness of the team that did the hauling. A man walked alongside his rope, holding a sharp axe. So we have, at this point, let me get some little props here. What can I use? Oh, I have something funny. Hold on. All right. This is my phone cord charger, and it's got a little shark. We're gonna imagine that the shark is actually a horse or oxen. And this, my iPod's case is going to be our wagon. Now we have a man, and he's walking right here as they walk across the ice. Now he's doing this with an axe in his hand. Why would he do that? Because if the ice starts to crack and the cannons are going to drop through the ice, what do they need to cut away in order to make sure that our horses or our oxen can escape? They need to cut this line, because if this goes down, this is going to go right down with it. So the men are walking along the side in order to chop this if this starts to go down. Okay? So this is what we're about to read. Give you a little visual there. Okie doke. Kind of lost my place. That's okay, I'll find it. The colonel had a long rope tied to the front of each sled and wagon. The other end was attached to the harness of the team that did the hauling, and a man walked alongside with his rope, holding a sharp axe. Colonel Knox climbed on the first sled and took the reins. You keep an eye on that rope, he said to the man with the axe. If the sled breaks through the ice, cut the rope fast. Then if it goes down, the load won't drag the team along with it, but you'll have to look sharp. So guys, here is my chapter markups here. So obviously you're going to notice that we have suspense going throughout the duration of the page. This right here is survival, guys. This is conflict, because it is literally man versus nature. And what I wrote on the side, I wrote, this is about survival. This is about these guys making it through. Everyone stood on the bank, watching tensely as Henry snapped the reins. The horses leaned into the traces and stepped out onto the ice. It crackled a few warnings, but it managed to hold, carefully, foot by slow foot. The sled moved across the frozen river, sweating in spite of the cold. Henry talked to the horses and coaxed them. William bit his lip anxiously. J.P. Becker held his breath. The sled passed the halfway mark and grew nearer to the far shore. And in a few minutes, though it seemed like hours to the men, the gun was across and the horses scrambled to safety. Henry hopped down and joyously waved his hat. Will and the others cheered wildly, hurried to get the next sled ready. Then, one by one, horses and oxen, tethered to the long, taut rope, that means it's pulled out tight, hauled the cargo across. Every step of the way, the men with the axe stood ready in case of danger. So guys, again, I'm going to show you this here. I'm going to give you the whole, you can go ahead and pause this if you want to look at the markups. We have right here, we've got some vocabulary words in blue. We've got some conflict going on here, a little foreshadowing, and some characterization. So let's keep going. The river passage took all afternoon. Finally, every load was across the Mohawk except for 3 cannons, the heaviest of them all. These are also the most important cannons, guys. These were Henry's pride and joy and the most important of his weapons, and he wanted to be sure they would make it across safely, so he had fresh holes chopped along the route. In the gathering darkness, river water rushed and gushed from the holes and swept across the ice. By morning, the new layer should be frozen fine, Henry said to Will. We'll try crossing the big guns then. That night after supper, after the hot coffee was brewed over the campfire, the men sat around smoking their pipes and staring into the flames. One of the soldiers took a wooden fife from his tunic and began to play softly. J.P., sitting with a warm blanket around his shoulders, recognized the tune. It was called the Liberty Song. It was a great favorite among the colonists. In fact, some thought of it as their new anthem. A few troopers began to sing, and the boy listened happily to the stirring words. Come join hand in hand, brave Americans all, and rouse your bold hearts at fair liberty's call. No tyrannous acts shall suppress just your claim, or stain with dishonor America's name. The sound of the fife slid into the chorus, and the others added their voices. In freedom we are born, and freedom we will die. Our hearts are ready, steady, friends ready, not as slaves, but as freemen. Our strength we shall give. All right, I have a markup here, and I was like, wow, not as slaves. So they're saying that they were slaves to England. But guys, remember that one of the things that's going on in the nation at this point is we're having an issue with slavery. So, you kind of think about that for a second. And then we're going to go blue and purple for our final 2 lines. The campfire blazed into the night air. Orange flames leaped high. That's personification right there, because flames really can't leap. People leap. Into the night sky, their brightness echoing the bright hopes of a country struggling to be born. Okay, so our next 2 pages are all suspense, guys, as we're trying to move those final 2 cannons across. I'm going to go ahead and show you that you can pause it if you want. Okay. At daybreak, the men prepared for the test. The first of the huge guns, hauled by 4 pair of oxen, was eased carefully onto the frozen river. The ice cracked and cracked as if complaining about its burden, but the extra thickness worked, and the surface held. When this gun was across, the second cannon was moved without incident, and finally there was only the 24-pounder left. This was Will's gun, and he would not allow anyone else to take it across. He climbed aboard the sled and guided the oxen out onto the ice. The creaking sounds grew louder and more menacing. Will sat tensely, hardly daring to breathe. The axeman walking alongside looked nervous and tested the sharpness of his blade. The oxen passed the halfway point. Slowly they inched closer and closer to the far shore. Henry began to breathe a sigh of relief. Crack! Crack! The noise came sharp and loud, almost like gunfire. The great black gap opened in the ice. Will jumped from the sled. The axeman leaped forward, swung his blade, and parted the rope. As the gun went under, the oxen, suddenly free from their load, reacted in fear. They lunged forward, trying to reach safety. JP's father, who was standing nearby, dove at the harness to keep the clumsy animals under control. He was yanked forward, where he tripped over a root and fell to the ground. The old farmer lay on the frozen shore, holding his shoulder and gasping. JP rushed over, his face pale with alarm. A soldier who had been trained as a medical orderly hurried over, and he knelt down and examined the groaning man. It's not serious, he said. He's thrown his shoulder out. I can put it right, but he'll need a sling. And I'm afraid he won't be able to use that arm for a few days. So I did conflict there, guys. Who's going to drive the team? Okay. While the trooper went to work on Mr. Becker, Henry and Will looked at their sunken cannon. This is the one they needed the most. Luckily, it had gone down near the bank where the river was shallow, and part of the gun and cart were showing above the surface. Oh, Okay, so what can they do? They got a lot of animals on their side and people, so think about that. Logically, what can you do? Okay. All right. Colonel Knox was not about to abandon his biggest and finest prize. Okay, so you're going to see that I underline that in pink. That gives us characterization. And then you're going to see my connection, and it says braces retainer in the trash. So when I first got my braces off, I was in not college, it was high school, I had a retainer that I had to take in and out every day. And one day I threw it away. And I walked out of the cafeteria and I was like, oh, I just threw away my retainer. So I ran back in and I told the cafeteria lady, I'm like, no, don't take the trash. Don't take the trash. And she's like, you can't go digging through the trash. I'm like, it's $500. If I go home without my retainer and tell my parents that they have to pay $500 for another retainer, they're going to kill me. So I'm like, no. I will go through the trash. So I went through the trash and I found my $500 retainer. And no, I did not put it in my mouth. I did take it home and we put it in boiling water and we sterilized it before I put it back in my mouth. But that's what it reminded me of. I was like not about to leave that $500 retainer behind, just like they're not about to leave this priceless cannon behind. Okay, bring plenty of rope and get some teams ready, he said to Will. We're gonna haul her out. For the rest of the afternoon, the men strained and sweated, hauling on ropes and prying at the gun with stout poles and urging the animals on. Little by little, the little monster crept free of the Mohawk's icy clutches. I love that line. It's a metaphor and an idiom. And think about science when you learned with Shaheen and Flores about the pulley systems and simple machines. That's what they're doing, guys. So go back and think about that science lesson and make a connection for me here. Let me show you this page so you guys can pause. And then I'll show you the last page. Okay. Worn out from the day's work, the crew camped right there at the edge of the river's edge. Hollow-eyed, they ate supper quickly and were soon asleep. All except J.P. His father felt better now. But the boy sat beside him, keeping a drowsy watch, super protective of his dad. At dawn, the farmer, with his arm in a sling, met with Colonel Knox. With the arms strapped, there was no way he could control the horses hitched to the Becker's wagon, so that's conflict. Henry scratched his chin. His drivers were all needed elsewhere, so he had no one else to spare. J.P., remember that's the farmer's son, standing nearby, cleared his throat and tugged on his father's shirt. What is he going to offer to do? You got it. Becker grinned. I know what's on your mind, John. You think you can handle 4 horses? J.P. nodded quickly. Sure I can, Pa, if you'll ride next to me. I'll do everything just the way you did. It's pride, it's characterization too. Colonel Knox was anxious to solve the problem, so he smiled his approval. Fine, son, fine, then it's settled. With a nod, he hurried off to organize the rest of the caravan. Minutes later, Henry trotted by on his mare and signaled for the convoy to begin. With his father beside him, Henry snapped his reins and called to the horses, trying to do just what the older man had done. And the animals moved ahead obediently. As the long lines of vehicles lumbered away from the frozen river, John thought he would burst with pride. He wasn't an onlooker anymore. He was a real team member now, doing his bit for the great cause. So guys, do you see a connection there between JP and Will Knox at the beginning of our book? There's what we call a parallel character structure. So both were feeling a little bored, both wanted to do something for the cause, and Will did what he did when he joined his brother to get the cannons, and now JP has a parallel structure, and that he is helping by doing something as well. So it's what we call a parallel character structure. It's kind of a cool thing. All right, so this ends today. You guys get online, mark those up if you didn't mark them up as we went. I'll read again another day, and I'll have them posted for your Thursday reading. All right, I miss you guys terribly, and I hope that you're all doing what you need to do, that social distancing, and staying safe, and just remember that I love you. Okay? Until we see each other again. Bye-bye.